There is more cocaine available and easier to get, higher quality, further across the world than at any other time in history. People tend to think the golden age was Pablo Escobar. Oh, back in the 80s. Well, you know, we had some bad times, but we took down the bad guy, and now we're managed. No, this is it. This is the golden age of cocaine. Cocaine is taking root across the world in scary ways I don't think we're really conscious of. The goal after 5 years of that plan was that Colombian cocaine production should be cut in half. And yet, here we are, 25 years later with more cocaine than ever before. And the point of my book, I wanted to go, I'm not a pundit, I'm a reporter. So I don't want to give ideas about what it could be. I'm happy to discuss, but I don't have ideas to solve the problem. But what I can do is go to the front lines and come back and say, what we are doing is not working. It's time for someone else, smarter than me, to think about the solution. I think the world has the right to say to Colombia, why are you producing more cocaine than ever before? That's an entirely legitimate question. But Colombia can ask the world, why are you consuming more cocaine than ever before? There's a dialectic there.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Talk Latin America. She's Michelle Marinho, CGTN's Latin America editor.
And he is Diego Laje, our anchor here in Washington, D.C.
Today we're going to talk to Toby Muse, an investigative reporter specialized in the drug trade. He has invaluable insights and views into what probably will surprise you around what we call the war on drugs. Let's get to it. Toby Muse, thank you very much for joining us. It's great having you. You wrote an account of how a kilo of cocaine goes from Colombia to its final destination. You were reporting out of Colombia for a long time. At which time did you realize this is a book and it's not just reporting?
Really, I think it was around the time of the Colombian peace process, which is in 2016, and I realized the central role cocaine was going to have in Colombia's chance for peace. While there's a thriving cocaine industry, Colombia and many other parts of the world cannot experience peace. Cocaine equals violence for reasons we can get into. And I realized that cocaine had been steadily growing more and more in terms of quantity. Its influence was expanding across the world. And I realized no one had really decided or put the term to it. We are living in the golden age of cocaine right now.
Well, stop there. Yeah. What do you mean with the golden age of cocaine?
There is more cocaine available and easier to get, higher quality, further across the world than at any other time in history. People tend to think the golden age was Pablo Escobar. Oh, back in the 80s. Well, you know, we had some bad times, but we took down the bad guy, and now we're managed. No, this is it. This is the golden age of cocaine. Cocaine is taking root across the world in scary ways I don't think we're really conscious of. And that's because Colombia is producing more than ever. Colombia has never produced as much cocaine as it is now, and that's a global trend.
So do you think that Richard Nixon back in the 70s, when he declared war on drugs, well, that was not the goal, right? So it's getting worse.
No, that definitely was not the goal. And it has been getting worse. And even, yes, you're correct. We recently celebrated the war on drugs 50 years. And yeah, there's more cocaine than ever. But I would narrow it down even more to look at something like the US and European plan of Plan Colombia, which was in 2000. This was an idea to give billions to the Colombian government, will steady the government against a Marxist insurgency, and also the cocaine cartels. That was a double goal of Plan Colombia. The goal after 5 years of that plan was that Colombian cocaine production should be cut in half. And yet, here we are, 25 years later with more cocaine than ever before. And the point of my book, I wanted to go, I'm not a pundit, I'm a reporter. So I don't want to give ideas about what it could be. I'm happy to discuss, but I don't have ideas to solve the problem. But what I can do is go to the front lines and come back and say, what we are doing is not working. It's time for someone else, smarter than me, to think about the solution.
And there's a pretty interesting thing that I read in your book. It was the former president, Colombia's former president, Juan Manuel Santos, that described that it's just like an exercise bike, right? It's a lot of effort. The war on drugs, a lot of effort. You look left, you look right, and you are in the same place over and over. And it's a pretty simple analogy, and it's easy to understand what is happening, right?
And it rings especially true for certain countries. Colombians and other countries, Mexicans, also have a similar vision on this, is that they really believe that they pay the highest possible cost for the war on drugs. The war on drugs in America is a metaphor, an analogy. Oh, okay, we're going to... And it's led to huge abuses in certain cases. Again, I'm not criticizing the entire approach, but it has led to certain abuses. Certain communities of color, for instance, say that they've been more victimized in the US because of the war on drugs. But the war on drugs in Colombia is fought with heavy artillery, attack helicopters, and fighter jets. The Colombians say, we provide the dead for this war on drugs. And they're not wrong. So there's a great deal of frustration. And Juan Manuel Santos, who received the Nobel Prize for his peace process with that Marxist insurgency, the FARC, in 2016, made at least 2 concerted attempts to try to get the world to at least begin a discussion about the war on drugs. And just to finish off this, I've talked about Colombian production. I think the world has the right to say to Colombia, why are you producing more cocaine than ever before? That's an entirely legitimate question. But Colombia can ask the world, why are you consuming more cocaine than ever before? There's a dialectic there.
You spent time in the jungle talking to all the actors involved in this trade, from the farmer onwards, right? From the leaf, from the coca leaf onwards. What drove you there to the jungle? It's a super dangerous place. You could have been kidnapped by the FARC, and we could have not seen you or seen you 20 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's you choose the places you go and you try to prepare it as much as you can. You speak to people who live on the ground, and they will often... The game in the countryside is a lot more subtle than we think as outsiders. There's winks and nudges, and they go into a town. Everyone actually knows who the member of the FARC is in that town. They're not going to say because it would put their life in danger. But they have a way of turning up maybe to the bar that this guy, the FARC guy, owns, and will sit there and have a loud conversation about, oh, my friend, the journalist, is going to come in and do a story, making sure that the owner of this bar can hear what she's saying. And then if he has a problem, he'll come over and say, oh, you know, this bridge that connects us, that bridge is really dangerous. I don't know if foreigners should be coming here. You know, there's a delicate language going on. And I find, interestingly, the language between the peasants, as we call them, small farmers, and the FARC is really interesting. People think it's this thing of a man or a woman, in the case of the FARC, comes in a camouflage with an AK-47 and is giving orders. It's much more subtle than that. If they just don't want to do it, they have their own way of playing dead, the Campesinos, the small farmers, to get the FARC to do what they want. So I would work with local activists who wanted this problem shown to the world. That's what everybody said to me. They said, we want you to show the world how we live. The biggest joke for them is that the people who grow the coca leaf or turn the coca leaf into the first stage of cocaine, which is called coca paste, these people don't live like rich people, and they want the world to know that. Come and see our problems. We don't have the minimum of security, education, healthcare. We live by ourselves. The government has abandoned us. Show the world that.
Adding to Diego's question, so it's a podcast, so we have on YouTube, but how would you describe, for people that are listening, the first time you got there? Like the smells, what were you seeing, how people received you, because it was your first time. I understand that, well, after 1 week, you are one of their friends. But
Sure.
First time.
The first time I went to a coca zone, these are the absolute most abandoned place. I was there when the civil war was raging at its highest. So foreigners did not go to Colombia. I would go as a foreigner because Which year? Oh, so I arrived in Colombia in the year 2000. This is Colombia is the kidnapped capital of the world at this point. Foreigners just did not go. I know this is difficult now. Now Colombia is the tourist destination. Cartagena, Medellin, and now Cali, Bogota. No, this was, people just wouldn't go. My mother had sleepless nights about the fact I was living in Colombia. A car bomb would go off in the port city of Buenaventura, which is, I don't know, 500 miles away. She would hear it on the BBC World Service, and she would like send me an email or something. Oh, no, I was living in Bogota. Just checking. You're okay. Yeah, like, thank you, man. The shockwave didn't reach the 500, 600 miles. But I would go to these tiny towns in the jungle, and the children would treat me like I was Santa Claus. They had never seen a foreigner before. They would just wander behind me. But I'm trying to get to how isolated these cocaine communities are. And you really have to get there because it's an illegal industry. I know I'm stating the obvious, but it doesn't grow next to the highway. The coca, you have to go off the highway and you have to really struggle to get there. So the place I went to there, the first third of my book is in the countryside where the coca is grown. It's a region called Catatumbo, which in the indigenous language means land of lightning, because Catatumbo, up by the Venezuelan border, has more lightning strikes than anywhere else on the planet. To get to where I was, I had to leave the state capital and get there. And it took us about 6 hours, if I'm not wrong. It was 2 hours on the highway filled with potholes from guerrilla attacks where the bombs had exploded. We then went off onto a muddy road that you had to be either on a motorbike or a bus for the big wheels to go, because it was just mud. Then we had to cross a river on a makeshift floating like kind of ferry, but it was like just petrol plastic barrels on top of under pieces of wood to cross over. Then an hour on a motorbike, so 6 hours. When I looked on the map from the state capital to where we were, it was 30 kilometers as the crow flies. Wow. But that's Colombian terrain. So you get there and you're in the middle of nowhere. People don't have anything and they're fending for themselves. As I say, where I was, they had to build their own school. They had to fund it. Where was the government? Where is the government? We keep asking. But the sights and the sounds of it, there's usually guerrilla presence in the background. There's a sense that you're being watched constantly. Especially, they always have doubts about me. They may accept me, but there's a 5–10%. Wait, is this guy CIA? Is this guy DEA? You know, they're keeping an eye on me. The smells and sounds of the cocaine laboratory is a weird one. There's ammonia, there's sulfuric acid. You're in the middle of nature, but you've got these god-awful chemicals in your nose, and they laugh at you because you sort of start choking up, because that's a human reaction to getting a nose full of ammonia. But, you know, these guys have been dealing with this for years now, and they think it's funny. When they think it's funny when the gringo starts coughing because of sulfuric acid. You know, look at this guy. You know, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, once they've accepted you, on the whole, they're very polite. That's the Colombian small farmers' way to be very polite. If you're in there, they're very polite.
And the woman there, I'm sorry to cut you, and the woman there, because FARC has a lot of women, right? So they were involved in the productions, like the farmers, production, everything.
Yeah, I mean, the FARC's role in the cocaine industry, I think, is a specific question, and we can get to that. But just in the countryside, the FARC were not overseeing the cocaine laboratories I was at. These were small farmers running them. They would grow the coca, and then on their own land, they would have a small laboratory that would turn the coca leaf into this block of ugly material called coca paste. That is the first step. And that's like, this kilo is the first step of turning that into a block of pure cocaine. But the FARC were in the background. The FARC claim they only tax the cocaine industry. What they say is they never got involved directly into exporting. I don't think that's true, but this is what they say. But yes, the FARC does have about 40% women. That's what they claimed. So on the few fighting forces as well, I think them and the Kurds are the only, maybe the Tamils as well, were the only force to have women at the front line fighting. Women were expected to fight as much as the men in the FARC. But the women are also in the Colombian countryside, and I think this might be the case in much of Latin America. I mean, you hate to stereotype, but they're often the ones who get things done. You know, I mean, the amount of men who will let you down in the Colombian countryside is astonishing. But there's a woman there, and like, one man let you down, the second man let you down, the third man, then you go to the woman, and she's like, all right, let's get this done. All right, she's the one who will actually come through, who will she tells you she's going to be there at 10 a.m., she will be there. The other guy, it's flip a coin. He's there, yeah, not, I mean, it's, and, and that really does go through what cocaine does as well. The men can really misspend this money, and the women really don't like that.
You also spoke to cartels.
Yes.
What's the difference between talking to the campesinos, to the producers, and then talking to these bosses?
On the whole, no one in Colombia really thinks that the farmers are criminals. They may be indulging in crimes, but Colombians are quite understanding about the situation of the Colombian countryside. And they don't really, there's a term cocalero, which is someone who grows coca, obviously. And I think most Colombians just say, yes, he does grow coca, she does grow coca, but it's understandable that they live in the middle of nowhere, there's no infrastructure. I mean, again, going back previously, but if you live in the middle of nowhere and you have a ton of pineapple, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? If there's no road to get out from your farm, what are you supposed to do with that? You can't get to the local village to sell it off. Or you spend half of the transporting that. Remember, on the motorbike, a ton of, but coca, a kilo, you just throw in a backpack. So there's an understanding. So these people are trying to get through life. Now, maybe that's overly understanding to this decision to get into the coca business, but we'll leave that to one side. Once you talk to cartels, these people have absolutely decided to be criminals. And they often have, depending on the person, they can be quite self-pitying about this. But really, many of them dig the idea of being a gangster. They are enthralled to this life. And I think the biggest Ponzi scheme for mainly young men, the biggest scam con going, is the life of organized crime.
Why?
Come in and you may have the chance to have that actress girlfriend, to buy a big house for your mother, and to have that Ferrari. That's what they're dreaming of. Yeah, they're not dreaming of buying nappies for their pregnant girlfriend. Come on, let's stop this. They're not doing that. They want that lifestyle. They demand, they're slum kids often, and they want that actress girlfriend, nothing less.
Yeah.
And they believe they're entitled to it. And that's why they embark on this. But 99 of them are going to die before they're 30. On their first job on the back of a motorbike with a gun, they're sent to a rival neighborhood to shoot someone down. This is how most of these guys, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, actually gets that girlfriend, actually gets that Ferrari. But it's the hope that keeps this meat grinder going. A next generation, the next generation, the next generation of young men ready to come and live and die for cocaine, because that's what they're doing.
And how do they choose the next Pablo Escobar, the next El Chapo?
No, you fight for it. You become...
You literally fight for it?
I mean, you are smarter. There's a weird thing about this, that we've created this black market where all of these people exist and thrive. I believe if we hadn't outlawed alcohol, Al Capone never would have risen above one street corner in Chicago. He would have been knocking off stores, extorting old ladies. He's a thug. But we create this black market where he can make untold millions with booze. We're doing the same. El Chapo is not an impressive man. Pablo Escobar is not an impressive man. But they have the characteristics to thrive in the black market. They're violent, they're merciless, they're relentless, and they're ambitious. And they have some smart, some cunning, yes. But I don't think they're particularly important. But they have all of those characteristics more than their rivals, and they kill their rivals. And that's how we get to the top.
You've been living the cocaine trade for over 20 years to write this book. How has it changed you?
Yeah, I mean, exposure to violence is a strange thing that takes time to understand, I think. You can be changed by it. I think violence changes people, I think there are hidden truths about this world that you can learn, that sometimes you think, is it worth having learned? I ask myself that.
Like what, for example?
Well, just the role of violence, just the role of what man is capable of doing to each other. There is a fundamental truth, but I wonder if I'm enriched by knowing that or not? And I think many people in certain of these professions do ask ourselves these questions. That is it just to stare at the sun in all of its glory and have your eyes burned out? Or is it better to not stare at the sun? So I wonder about this thing. But Colombia's it's an incredibly beautiful country. There's so much to learn there. Incredible. But the violence is utterly heartbreaking. And it's constant. And it never stops. And there's no future where it stops that I can see. We can pretend that, next year's going to... No. They've been doing this for 100 years at least. There's political violence, then came narco violence. We just had a pre-candidate for the president shot and killed who was a friend of a friend, a friend of a very close friend of mine. And just for what? The man who pulled the trigger just got 7 years. He was underage. It's grim. It's not Day of the Jack or, this is, an expert and, high money stakes, Swiss bank accounts. It's grim. It's giving money. There's a term, this is how grim Colombia can be. There's a term called suizos, which is an assassin that's never meant to come back from the job. A Swiss, literally, a Suizo. Yeah, but obviously someone in Colombia looked at it on paper and said, oh, that looks like suicide. It's a suicide job, but the person doesn't know it. So what happens is you're supposed to go and kill a presidential candidate, and the idea is you're going to be cut down by his security. But and this has happened many times in Colombia, by miracle you survived? What happens is when you go to collect the other part of your payment, they tie up the loose end and they shoot you. This is how grim it is, and it's relentless. So yeah, I think these things can change you.
War can change you too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, and this is
war.
This is war, yeah. I mean, I've covered wars in Syria, in Iraq, and the constant dread of Colombia in a violent zone is a thing to behold. It's like an anchor around your neck. Syria, when the bombs stop, you actually sit there and you drink tea, because you're not drinking anything else in Syria. You drink tea until 4 o'clock in the morning, chat and, talk, and everyone's like, ha, ha, ha. Then there's then everyone gets up at midday in Syria, then they decide to start fighting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They've had their falafels, and it's very regulated. But Colombia, it's this just endless dread, and it could happen at any moment. And you may not see a gun in a village, but it just feels, it weighs on you. It can be an experience.
What's next? What's next after this book? What do you expect will happen?
In the
a quarter of a century went into producing the pile of paper I have in front of me. You don't do it for nothing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would like to adapt it. I think there's a way to adapt this into a fiction series. I think would be an interesting way of adapting this. I think there's a lot of human stories, and that was one of the essences I wanted to tell, that the human stories of this, because I think too many times people have treated the cocaine trade as a bunch of numbers and Excel sheets and graphs, and we've gone up by 15%, down by 2%. These are human people at the center of this whirlwind of violence. And I want to tell those stories. The hitman, his lover, the drug trafficker, the cop who's trying to chase them. It's the essence of drama every day.
Toby Muse, thank you very much. Great having you.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.